Okay, so another day, another patch. The mid-season came really, really early. Apparently it's because the Transformers collab apparently had to happen right now, and they wanted to do the mid-season with that collab, so it released really early. In fact, a little inconveniently early. I had a bunch of replay codes I was going to record, and I lost them. Though in fairness, I kind of knew. I had a feeling something like that might have happened, so I probably should have just done it sooner. Either way, we're going to start with something a little bit different this video. You know, I already recorded this once, but I feel like, the way I recorded it, it wasn't right, And I think I'm going to take a different approach with this one. So let's just start with this. That was a full clip. This weapon has 170 DPS. I'd also like to point out that since we're in the practice range, we're technically in open queue, which means that tanks have less health. This Orisa doesn't even have a full health bar. They also aren't using any abilities like Fortify or Javelin Spin. This is just their normal health bar. No healing, nothing. This is just open queue Orisa, so less HP Orisa with no abilities, no damage reduction, nothing. Just her health and her armor.
That warms the bones.
That was, what, 45 shots it took to kill her? That's quite a lot. Now, and again, that's with the reduced health. Now, you might be wondering what's going on there. Well, there's a reason why I wanted to open with this. It's because when we go back and we look at the patch notes, there's a change right at the top. And I really think that people are going to underestimate the enormous downstream effects of this change if I don't show them that. Because people have already underestimated changes like this in recent memory. Recently, they reverted armor to work back how it did in Overwatch 1, where it reduced damage per hit rather than by a percentage amount. That was how it was in Overwatch 1. In Overwatch 2, they changed it to 30% less damage in all situations, but no, they turned it back to this. Now, there is a limit to this, you didn't know. It can't reduce more than 50% of the damage, so if, say, you try and shoot something that does 5 damage, and then it gets reduced by 5, it doesn't actually get reduced by 5, it gets reduced by 2.5. But even still, that's enormous damage reduction. Now, here's the thing. You see this change right here? Flat damage reduction increased from 5 to 10 per projectile. I really don't think if I didn't show you that at the start that most of you would understand just how devastating this is to almost every character in the entire game. Basically, having armor is having Orisa Fortify on steroids now without having to actually press a button or move slower. Orisa Fortify only provides 45% damage reduction. Armor provides 50% damage reduction, which is more. It also doesn't have any penalty, it doesn't have any cooldown, and also, on top of all that, like it doesn't make you slower and all that kind of thing, on top of all that, you might be saying, well, what are you saying? It's 10 less damage per projectile. For projectiles that don't shoot super fast, that isn't going to be 50% less damage. That's just the worst case scenario. But let me ask you this. If I go to the hero gallery right now, how many heroes in this hero gallery will have less than 50% damage reduction against armor? Jungle Queen Shotgun, 50% damage reduction. Doomfist Fist Spikes, 50% damage reduction. DVa, 50% damage reduction. Mauga, 50% damage reduction. Orisa, I think her bullets will be fine. I think Orisa's bullets will be fine, but even still, maybe 50%, because she shoots about as fast as Soldier. I actually don't know for Orisa. Ramatra's Nanobots, 50% damage reduction. Reinhardt will be fine with his hammer. Roadhog Shotgun, 50% damage reduction. I think you're getting the point. Sigma will be okay. Winston goes through his armor at least. Wrecking Ball's guns, 50% damage reduction. Zarya goes through armor. Okay, what about the DPS? Well, the snipers will be fine. Ashe will be fine. Widow will be fine. Bastion, 50% damage reduction. Cass obviously will be fine. Echo, 50% damage reduction. Genji, 50% damage reduction. Hanzo will be fine. Junkrat will be fine. Mei, I think bypasses armor with a spray, I think. So I think Mei will be fine. PHARAH will be fine. Reaper, 50% damage reduction. Sojourn, 50% damage reduction. Soldier, 50% damage reduction. I really just need to drill this in. Sombra, 50% damage reduction. Symmetra can bypass it. Torbjorn, yeah, can basically... Well, his shotgun will be worse, but his single shot will be better. Tracer, 50% damage reduction. Venture will be okay, I guess. And Widowmaker will be okay. And even the support category. Support category is probably the one that's the best off here, but even still. And I can go through armor. Baptiste, I think Baptiste is basically 50%. It's 25 damage per bullet in 3 bursts, so it'll be 15 damage per bullet. So it'll be just below 50%. We're talking like still like around 45%. We're talking about 4 to 5 numbers here. Brig, I can't be bothered to figure out the numbers in my head. Illari will be okay. Kiri will probably be okay. Yeah, Kiri will be okay. Life Weaver, 50% damage reduction. Lucio, 50% damage reduction. Mercy, I mean, doesn't really matter for Mercy. Moira bypasses armor. Zen would probably be fine. But even Zen will probably be a little bit worse because he does shoot orbs relatively fast. So you get my point. If you're not a sniper, and you're not Cass, and you're not a beam weapon character, you basically now play against Orisa for every tank. Except they always have Fortify until you get rid of their armor. And they don't go slower when they have Fortify. And, you know, there's no cooldown or anything. That's just how it is now. Yeah, I just wanted to open with this. Like, it is a bit sensationalizing, but at the same time, I feel like I have to do this. Like, usually I like to do it the slow, methodical, like, let me explain it way. But you know what? I will sensationalize this a bit, because I feel like people consistently underrate the power of armor in this game. Because I will say this. I don't think it's a coincidence the second that they changed armor back to its Overwatch 1 state, in which Cass basically received no damage reduction, suddenly Cass is the meta DPS. I do think other factors were involved, like the fact that he was a hit scan with CC, which means that while most hit scans are supposed to be countered by dive, Cass was a hit scan that counters dive. So if range and mobility is what matters with the DPS passive, as I've kept saying, the DPS passive made range and mobility more important, and you have a character that has range that nukes characters that have mobility, yeah, it makes sense that Cass can be good, but a huge part of that was also that Cass was one of the only characters that wasn't affected at all by the new armor changes. And now the armor's being even more intensified. Yeah, I think that's going to have massive downstream effects on the meta. I think characters are going to be practically dead, practically solely because of the armor changes. In fact, I'll give you an example right now, before we even dive into things. Soldier. I think Soldier 76 was actually kind of sneaky good at the start of this season. Because of the fact that dive was slowly being phased out, but it was still true that mobility and range were both really important, I think that Soldier was really good, because he was the best character in the game at keeping PHARAH and Echo in check, the best DPS in the game right now. He was also got to abuse both range and mobility, because he had sprint and a really good hit scan weapon, so he got to get the most out of the DPS passive. He was pretty good against most of the tanks in the meta. Generally, Soldier, I think, had a really, really good sort of set of matchups against the characters that mattered in the current state of the game, and just generally like felt really good to play in its current state. But now, Soldier does 50% less damage to all armor in the game. Now, Soldier is going to struggle to kill a fucking Brig, you know? Like, oh god, man. You know, that really hurts. Now, I literally, Soldier has received no direct changes this patch, but I think that one change is going to knock him down from being potentially a sleeper pick that, like, sneaks into the meta. Like, I was going to say that about him in this mid-season patch. But no, now that I've seen that, I'm kind of like, well, shit. Maybe he still gets in just as a niche pick, just because he is still very good against PHARAH and Echo, because they don't have armor. But, like, other than that, man, I feel like Soldier's already, like, an example of a character that kind of gets nuked by this change. Not to mention, like, this is being made because this is the tank buff patch, you know? At least quote-unquote. And so as a result, you might think that, like, this is a good thing at least, because at least tanks are having fun. But again, look at how many tanks actually get screwed by armor. Like, sure, they have armor too, but they get screwed by armor as well. As I said, Joker Queen, DVa, Doomfist, Mauga, Roadhog, Ramattra, Wrecking Ball. Like, a good more than half the tanks get screwed by armor, even if they also do have armor themselves. So you can see why this armor change is very concerning to me. Overall, this patch has me very mixed. How do I put this? This patch is unhealthy, is what I'll say. I actually kind of... I kind of like it, but I am fully aware I like it for the wrong reasons, if you know what I mean. I like it because I just want things to change, and I do think this patch is going to change quite a bit. I don't think it's going to fix the game, though. And I do think it's understandable that people are going so far as to say this is the patch that's going to kill Overwatch. I wouldn't go quite that far myself, but I see why people are getting so on edge about this patch. Because people have been saying for a while that tanks are actually plenty strong, but the reason they don't feel it is because every tank in the game is essentially in a state, well, not every tank, but most tanks are in a state where they're actually way above the power curve, but they don't feel like it. And they don't feel like it because, well, every tank in the game just gets switched off by multiple counter picks. And this is something I'm going to make a video on in the near future, hopefully, if I don't keep delaying it by accident. Sorry about that. But I am planning on making a video talking about that. I really feel like the reason that counter-swapping has ruined this game is because DPS have nothing better to do. And I know that tanks can still stack counter-swaps tanks, but people don't remember that people didn't really complain about counter-swapping you know, until, like, recent memory. In fact, people really didn't start complaining about counter-swapping until DPS started doing it too. And that's because, when it is just a 1 versus 1 counter-swap situation, there's plenty of room for the better player to still win. And it's honestly, don't get me wrong, maybe it's arguably not perfect, but it's honestly not really a big deal. Like, when you have to play Sigma into Zarya, but that's the only thing you have to worry about, and you still have the better team, you still win if you're the better player, and you don't really care that much. What people really don't like is when they're trying to play Roadhog and they get counter-swapped like Bastion, Mauga, and a Zen, you know? When they're trying to play Ball and they get counter-swapped like Roadhog, Sombra Cass with like Anna Brig, you know? That's what people don't like. When they're trying to play Reinhardt and the enemy team counter-swaps like Symmetra May, Orisa, and I don't know, I'll go Anna Brig again. Oh no, Anna Zen's probably a better one because Zen's pretty scary for Reinhardt. You get the idea. So, either way, I would say that's kind of where we are right now. This patch is good because it buffs tanks and that's going to feel good in the short term, and also, because they're giga-buffing tanks to such a ludicrous and frankly stupid degree, that does mean the meta is going to have to shift. And I'm making early predictions now. I have not played a single game in this patch because I want to test how good I'm getting at these predictions, but I essentially think we've finally gotten the push we needed to make a rush meta happen. And the reason why I say that is if it's a big deal, because it's not... I think it's neutral. I don't think it's good or bad, necessarily. I think dive metas are the most fun, and rush is not the most fun, but not as bad as poke. We've been kind of flitting between dive and poke for a while, and we've been slowly leaning to poke, and I'm like, oh, don't go back to full-on poke, don't go back to full-on poke. And it's good that we're not going to poke, at the very least, but anyway, why is rush a big deal? Well, because the Season 9 changes, as I mentioned, the DPS passive made it so that two things came way more important in this game. And I think this is generally a healthy thing. Having range and mobility became way more healthy. And that's good because that practically just has a direct correlation with rewarding skill, or at least it should. Players who can use range effectively and people who can move around effectively would get way more benefit than players that tried to play stupid numbers characters that traded both range and mobility for the sake of having stupidly high numbers. Cough cough Mauga, cough cough Roadhog, cough cough Orisa, etc., Bastion, whatever you want to say. And ultimately it was kind of successful with that, but of course there were exploits found, like the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, Cass kind of broke the whole system. He got to have range, but he also got to shut down mobility even if he didn't have it himself, so obviously he became really good with this new DPS passive. But the reason I bring this up is Rush is screwed by the DPS passive, because Rush's whole idea is that you have mobility, but not as much as dive. You know, you got Lucio speed, and maybe you've got things like Rein pin or whatever, but that's about it. You don't really have big mobility, just a little bit more than the slowest characters in the game. You also have terrible range. So you don't have mobility or range, really. All you really have to compensate is huge fucking numbers. You do huge damage, you have huge health pools, you just run into people and trample them. And that's what Rush does. So you can see why the DPS passive screws Rush, because if it reduces healing, that means that the Rush tanks can't get enough health to run people over, and also the Rush tanks don't get the Rush teams don't get the ability to apply the DPS passive as often, because they are running DPS that typically sacrifice mobility and range and get less opportunities to attack and therefore less opportunities to apply the DPS passive. Even if when they hit really hard, the DPS passive doesn't just hit harder because your shots hit harder, you know? So we're now moving to a rush meta, and it's the first time we've seen one in a good while. So I think it's going to be refreshing that we're going to see a rush meta, and I think it's better than where we were probably going to head if we didn't get these changes. I did not want to see another stale poke meta. We've had more than enough of those, thank you. But ultimately, can I say this is healthy for the game? Probably not, because most of these tanks are already, if anything, overtuned. They just don't feel fun because of how much they get counterpicked. And rather than addressing the counterpicking, or the fact that DPS have nothing better to do than to counterpick DPS because they can't kill supports, because that's what they're supposed to do, but they haven't been able to for years. So now, what else are they supposed to do except counterpick the enemy tank and make their day miserable? Because there's not much point in killing the enemy DPS if the enemy DPS can't achieve much, because no DPS can kill any support. You can't kill the supports, so if the DPS aren't worth killing and the supports can't be killed, who can you kill? Oh, that's right, the tank, the only person left. And already supports are well equipped to deal with tanks, so supports are already bullying the tank, and then that leaves the tank, the enemy tank, compared to your tank, and of course who else are they going to go for but the tank in front of their face, you know? You can see how this gets really frustrating, you know, where like, you have a situation where counterpicking is enabled because DPS are supposed to be going out of their way doing better things. They should have better things to do than bullying the tank. They should be able to go for the backline and, you know, get people, but I mean, we'll put it this simply. You're Genji. You dive Kiriko. Who do you think wins? No further information. Let's be real, Kiriko wins. Or if she doesn't win, she at least gets to run away. But usually she wins. Same for Illari. Same for Brig. Honestly, maybe not wins, but same for Lifeweaver. Basically always gets away. And yes, I know that's because you're supposed to get their cooldowns out first, but let me ask you this. When you're a support and you go to duel a DPS, do you have to get their cooldowns out first? No. No, you don't. But they have to get your cooldowns out first, not to mention they have to use cooldowns to even be able to approach you in the first place, because, well, you're in the back line. So I don't think the idea that, oh, you just have to bait cooldowns really solves everything, even if you can do that if you are a skillful player, and that is probably the best way to play the game if you're really tryharding and sweating. That doesn't mean I can't still look at it and go, you know, I think this might be shit. Like, sure, this is the best way to play the game as it is right now if you want to win, but, like, maybe it's not a good thing that that's the way the game is. You know, you could try and do 4 fake dives, quote-unquote, in a row to bait out every single support cooldown, and then go for the real dive and maybe get 1 kill on the enemy supports if you are way better at the game than they are. Or you could be not better at the game than anyone in particular and hold left-click on the enemy tank and, I don't know, pick Sombra and, like, perma-hack them, or pick Mei and wall them off all the time, and pick Bastion and just farm them. You get what I mean. Obviously, the flavour of that's in right now is, of course, the Flyers, who get to stay in the sky where the tank can't fight back, farm the tank all game for Duplicate if they're Echo, or farm it for Rocket Barrage if they're PHARAH. They can't fight back, they can't do anything about it, and also they just get to attack anyone they want while not being attacked themselves. So, yeah. Anyway, alright. So back on topic. Because we're in that state, yeah, tanks are in a pretty bad spot and they need help, but this is not the help they need, because all this does is it doesn't address counterpicking, but it just makes tanks more overtuned, which means there's going to be more problems in future if we do ever address counterpicking, because after we address counterpicking, we're going to be like, wait, tanks are super overtuned, how did that happen? Oh right, we overtuned them instead of addressing counterpicking. Okay, with all that said, I'm going to try and get through this much quicker than I did last time. Tank roll passive. Ult generation reduction reduced from... Sorry, increased... It's so confusing having reduction and increase next to each other. I know why, but from 30% to 40%. Decent change, but doesn't change much. Knockback resistance reduced from 50% to 40%. I mean, I'm glad they're reducing it, but really, man, like, just admit it was a mistake. Put it back to 30%. Hell, for all I care, put it back to 0. Remove it. But, like, I get it if you don't want to remove it. If you don't remove it, just put it back to 30. Like, are we really saying, you know, I thought that 30% was too little, 50% was too much, but 40% will be just right. No, let's be real. No, knockback reduction was a mistake. It removed so much tank-on-tank counterplay. It removed so much fun from the game. Yeah, let's just put that back. Anyway, D.Va's getting a defense matrix buffed, which is scary, honestly, because it's at 3.5 seconds now. Remember when, like, 2.5 seconds defense matrix was still really strong, and that was, like, impressive, and now we're at 3.5? Yikes. Micro missiles damage went up. Okay, these are okay, scary, but okay changes. Like, for the here and now, sure, whatever, makes D.Va a bit better, a bit more fun, she needs it. But, like, again, in the long term, bit scary that we're giving her this fucking much defense matrix. Doomfist, I will admit, I like this change. His passive, which grants overhealth for landing hits with his abilities on different targets, has always been a little bit underwhelming, and I've always wanted them to do more with it. So the idea that it gives 5 extra HP per target, and now it also waits 3 seconds before it starts draining rather than 1. I always thought 1 second. That was ludicrous, that you only got to use your overhealth for 1 second before it starts disappearing. Yeah, glad that that's gone. Junker Queen get an extra 25 HP on Commanding Shout and an extra 50% boost to... well, from 200% to 250%, so to speak, boost to Adrenaline Rush on the self-heal when you apply wounds to people. I will say this. I like the Commanding Shout buff, because I didn't like them nerfing it from 200 to 150 in the first place. I especially thought, like, it didn't change much, but the one thing it really changed is it made anti-nade, I feel like, used to not be that bad on Junker Queen, and making this change made it so anti-nade was actually pretty devastating. Because Commanding Shout, obviously you can't anti-heal over health, so Commanding Shout used to be great if you held it knowing they were going to nade you. You'd still be able to make a play even while naded by using Commanding Shout, but honestly, that little 50 health you lost, honestly, kinda ruined that. So 25 HP back, I like that, I guess. Adrenaline Rush is a little bit scary because it lets you farm ult faster, and ult casts faster now, and is still one of the strongest tank ults in the game. Suzu still counters it, that's still worrisome, but, like, even still, Suzu's cooldown keeps going up, Kiriko keeps getting worse, and I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm glad Kiriko's getting worse, but if Kiriko is getting worse and Suzu's getting longer cooldowns, how long can we really say, but yeah, it doesn't matter that her ult's going to be really strong, because Suzu exists, you know? So I think this is something to keep an eye on, but yeah, there's going to be a consistent theme, a whole lot of keep an eye on it. Okay, Mauga. I'm going to get back to Mauga when I'm done with the tanks, honestly. Mauga's a big one. Okay. Orisa... Okay, I was going to complain about the Orisa buff, but I will say, last time I overreacted, I'll put my hands up and admit I overreacted last time. I've underestimated Orisa buff so many times that I think I got a little bit jumpy on the last one, in hindsight. Especially because it was a Javelin Spin cooldown reduction, which I think is one of the scariest kinds of buffs you can give Orisa. And obviously I'll put my hands up and say I was wrong about Orisa in the last patch. She didn't become meta. And the other thing is as well, that I will admit this buff seems quite small to me. Another half a second on Fortify isn't nothing, but it isn't a lot. Not to mention, Fortify still slows you down, and still has a really long cooldown. I think the cooldown doesn't even restart until the Fortify is over, so having it last longer also still means you have to wait longer in between Fortifies unless you cancel it early. And on top of all that, there's one less thing that makes me certain that Orisa won't come back into the meta, and that is, we'll get to it in a moment, but Zarya got some huge buffs in this patch. And we kind of forget that Zarya is supposed to keep Orisa in check, but because like Orisa got so overtuned that using Fortify, she could just kind of tank Zarya a lot of the time. But now we're kind of back at the point where Zarya is starting to bully Orisa back into her place, and especially considering I think she was already like that before, and now she's getting buffs, like... Yeah, I think that we're not in danger of having an Orisa meta, because if Orisa, even if this half a second is the last push Orisa needed to be good, the second Orisa comes good, I'm pretty sure Zarya just like melts her to death, like especially with these buffs. But we'll get to that in a second. So there's some good news here. Ramattra, Nemesis form, got an extra 75 armor. Pummel got an extra 5 damage. Remember that armor is stupid good now, so this is terrifying. We're going to get back to what I think about the tank meta in a moment. I'm getting through these really quick without really explaining my positions, because I think it's better if I just show you the big picture, you know, once I'm done like getting through the little bits. Reinhardt got 200 extra HP on his barrier field, and also regenerates faster to compensate, so it's the same speed of, like, you know, regenerating the whole barrier, even though there's more health to regenerate. And charge finally went from 275 to 300. Should have happened literally 2 years ago, but whatever, we finally got it. Now we can finally kill Reaper and May. Amazing, who could have thought? Roadhog got his Pigpen buffed for some reason. It activates quicker when it hits the ground. It does 50% more damage with the DOT, and the cooldown now begins immediately when you press the button. Before, I think there was this window where until the Pigpen hit the ground, the cooldown counter didn't start. So now that's not the case anymore. Sigma, his rock got 40 extra damage on direct impact for 120 total. I still don't think you can one-shot with Sigma. I think Sigma's like primary fire does 55 per shot, so I think that's 230 for the combo rather than 250, so I still don't think you can one-shot, but I mean, you can closer to one-shot. You can one-shot with a melee now, actually, because that would be 270, if I'm remembering correctly. Winston's secondary fire can charge a bit faster. His primal rage is a bit more health. This is mostly quality of life, honestly. I don't actually think it changes that much. The health could potentially, but I just think that Primal Rage is already an ability where you are either unkillable if it's normal circumstances, or you die immediately even though you have 1,000 health if they have like a BAP window, a Discord orb, an anti-nade, whatever. So I feel like giving them 200 extra health doesn't really change much, because when they have ludicrously exponentially ramping damage, you still explode, but when they have normal amounts of damage, you're still invincible. Like, you know, I don't think there's that many breakpoints that this affects, even though it looks like a big change. Wrecking Ball gets his... Oh, this is sad, because these are really cool changes, but, like, they make me sad. I hated the fact that, I think it was all the way back in Season 3, one of the only changes I hated from Season 3, is they nerfed Wrecking Ball so that his cannons, the reload time on them was always 1.5 seconds. And one weird thing about Wrecking Ball is, until this patch, his automatic reload time, just by going into ball form and waiting, was the same as his manual reload. As a result, there was basically no reason to ever manually reload, because if you just went into ball form and waited a second and a half, the exact same time for a manual reload, you'd reload anyway without even having to press reload, or you could still be rolling around while you're reloading. Now, I get the logic. They were like, well, that doesn't make sense. There should be a decision here. There should be like a give and take. So we'll make it take 2 seconds to reload while in ball form. But the thing is, Wrecking Ball's a very, very active character who's often forced into situations that he has to react to quickly, and he doesn't necessarily want to deal with. People are always trying to chase and fuck over a Wrecking Ball. As a result, it's really important that you don't get caught with no bullets. and oh my god, the amount of times ever since they made this change that my muscle memory made me go into ball form for a second and a half and then go out of ball form and cancel my reload without realizing because the reload time's a little bit longer. I know it's a small thing, but that muscle memory destroyed me, man. I literally have died on multiple occasions as ball, probably like at least 20 times plus, because I thought I reloaded automatically because I'm so used to the 1.5 second window, when actually I waited 1.8 and I needed to wait 0.2 extra seconds to get the free reload, and now I don't have any bullets in the middle of a team fight, and now I'm surrounded, and now I've got to get out as fast as possible, and oh, I'm dead. And it's like, oh my fucking god, man. So I'm glad that that's gone, because I hated that. Now, it is still longer. It's 1.5 compared to 1.6, but obviously that's way, way more reasonable. Like, that's barely different. So I'm glad that's there. I also like that they buffed the Adaptive Shield's ability to give allies overhealth by giving them a 50% boost to the overhealth you grant to allies. So now if you sacrifice 100 overhealth to give 50 to two allies, they instead receive 150 total between the two of them, and they both get 75. That's a cool change. I like it. I already think that people underrated the ability to peel for people using Adaptive Shields. It is niche, but that doesn't mean it's really important when it is, like, worth using. I'll put it this way. It's not very common that you save someone's life with it, but when you save someone's life with it, it is huge and team fight winning, and it is something that happens on a semi-regular basis. Like 1 in every 3 games for me, I'll be in the middle of a dive, and maybe a Genji or a Tracer comes in to help me, and then they're about to die, and I'm like, oh shit, and I mash my Adaptive Shields button, even though I don't necessarily have to use them yet, specifically to give them the 50 extra overhealth, so they barely get out alive. And I have seen that save my teammates' lives while we're diving on, like, usually like 1 in every 3 or 4 games that happens. And yes, that is pretty rare that 1 in every 3 or 4 games I save one person, but ultimately as a wrecking ball, being able to save the person diving with you is enormous and basically wins entire team fights. So I'm glad that they just upped this a little bit to make it a bit more noticeable, and I'm glad that this ability is in the game. These changes are technically good, it's just the problem is that it doesn't address the big picture once again. Every single one of these changes is kind of like, that sounds good, right? No, don't look at the big elephant in the room. Don't look at the... No, ignore the big elephant in the room. No, don't look at it. you know what I mean? It's kind of like that. Yeah. Bingo. So, yeah, right now, the elephant in the room for Bull specifically is kind of the same as all other tanks, but Bull has it worse than any other tank in the game. I'll go as far as to say this. As someone whose favourite tank is Bull, I will... Yeah, I think I'm going to say this. I think that Bull right now, technically speaking, may genuinely be the single most broken character in Overwatch history. The only problem is, he's also the easiest character in Overwatch history to counter, which is the main thing that's keeping me in check. I genuinely think, maybe I just don't have enough experience with what Launch Brig was like, but I genuinely feel like Wrecking Ball right now is worse than Launch Brig. Because, like, genuine question. Imagine you're in a game, and for whatever reason, let's say, tomorrow we wake up, all CC, all stuns, all hacks, everything like that, gone from the game. There's no way to stop someone with mobility, except to simply just kill them, right? Just do enough damage to kill them. Genuine fucking question. How do you kill a Wrecking Ball with half a brain cell? Like, if the Wrecking Ball isn't just a straight-up idiot who just feeds all the time and just rolls into people with no plan, if that's not the case, how do you kill a Wrecking Ball if you don't have Hack, you don't have Spear, you don't have Rock, you don't have Flashbang, you don't have Magnetic Grenade, you don't have anything like that? How in the fuck do you ever kill Wrecking Ball? Genuine question. His HP bar has been fucking shot to the moon. His effective HP often approaches 2,000, and that's before healing or any health regeneration from health packs. That's before you factor in the fact he's the single most mobile character in the game. Genuinely, this character should not ever die under any circumstances unless either you're an idiot or he gets CC'd. And it's kind of sad, honestly, because this is why I'm mad about it, even though I'm a Wrecking Ball player. I feel like that means your skill means so much less on Wrecking Ball. Because I feel like I can give a shit performance on Wrecking Ball and still dominate purely because no one bothered to counterpick me. On the other hand, I feel like I can do God's work in the backline as Wrecking Ball, genuinely playing out of my mind, and genuinely doing a fucking 1v9 against the entire lobby, I guess, you know. And I feel like I can have games like that where I go fucking crazy. But because I've been triple counterpicked, we still lose. Sometimes it's not even like my stats, like, you know what I mean? Like, even though I'm like triple or quadruple or pentuple counterpicked at times, I still might end the game like 37-2. But we'll still lose just because my team's been perma-dead that much, you know? Because I can't really peel to help them, because if I do, I roll into the team of 5 people who all hard counter me. You know, it's like it's not a good idea actually. I kind of have to go off on my own. Sorry guys, you're gonna have to live on your own steam. Oh, you can't handle that? Oh, well, shrug. You know. Anyway. Zarya buffs, these are scary, I'm not going to lie. Zarya is looking like a bit of a dark horse candidate right now, where I can kind of see them sneaking up into the meta, you know? I can see them being this unexpected, like no one's really talking about them, but suddenly they're really relevant. And I'll get more into why later, but for right now we'll just talk about the buffs at hand. First of all, I'd like to say that Zarya's already been sneaking up in effectiveness without any direct buffs, in my opinion, aside from the Graviton Surge one. Because there was the Graviton Surge one, and that does matter, but as well as the Graviton Surge buff, there was also just the fact that I feel like right now, most of the time on tank, if it's not being counterpicked, the main thing that makes me lose is when I am doing everything correct, but quite simply my teammates can't stay alive for 5 seconds to follow up. And it's like, every single time it's like, okay, I'm in the perfect position, I've forced out all their cooldowns, now's when we dive, they die right now if we dive them. Come on team, let's go. Oh, I see our backline just disappeared. Right, okay, guess, I mean, I spent like 4 minutes setting up the perfect dive, but I guess our Anna Briggs somehow just died to a Genji, so shrug. And I'm not going to lie, games like that make me tear my hair out sometimes, and it's just so therapeutic to just go Zarya. Like, I don't even like Zarya. I hate Zarya usually, but I must admit I'm kind of coming to like Zarya. Just like, that's the theme with this whole patch. I'm starting to like Zarya, but just like this patch for the wrong reasons. Where I don't actually enjoy playing Zarya. I think Zarya is really one-note and boring. I feel like people only think they like Zarya because she's usually played with Reinhardt in 6v6, and that's people have good memories of that. But in reality, let's be real, Zarya is a noob stomper character for the most part, and her actual gameplay loop is mostly holding the big funny beam button and hitting the bubble button. Like, bubble is all you have on Zarya. I think she's a really boring, like, one-dimensional design that is really unfun to deal with and really unfun to play as. But the one thing that's making me enjoy her right now is just the fact that, man, is it so much less stressful when every single time my teammates feed and are dying and I just need them to stay alive for 5 fucking seconds, I can just bubble them and, like, oh, thank God, you know, like, I pick Zarya when it's just like, okay, right, time to babysit, you know. Anyway, with all that said, the buffs themselves, 25 extra HP on the barriers and 0.5 extra seconds on both barriers. By the way, that's a 25% increase to their duration, during which time the people you bubble are essentially invincible. So this is 5 seconds of invincibility between 2 bubbles, and then if you didn't remember, they did keep the thing where giving a bubble to your ally has a shorter cooldown than using a bubble on yourself. So it's 10 seconds on yourself, 8 seconds on an ally. Do you know what that means? That means that if you bubble an ally, wait for the lockout period, bubble them again, wait for the lockout period, you now have a 3rd bubble ready, bubble them again. You can triple bubble allies right now with these changes. You can basically triple bubble the same ally multiple times over. Now don't get me wrong, that would leave you no bubbles, but my god, that means you can really make one ally basically unkillable. Like, obviously they'll have windows in between the bubbles where you have the lockout period, but let's be real, if they're getting healed as well, they're not going to die in those small windows, so, like, basically you can make someone invincible for a good, like, what? If it's 3 bubbles, and then, like, the lockout period in between. Let's just call it something like 12 seconds. For a good, like, 12 seconds or so, you can just make a character effectively unkillable by any means at all. And, you know, if that's the right person at the right time in the right place, that can be really devastating. The other big thing is to keep in mind is that Zarya's beam ignores armor. And that's a huge deal, because as I said, there's so many characters in the game now who just had their damage output fucking halved by the existence of armor just being this strong. And Zarya is one of the only tanks in the game completely unaffected. And she was already a really high DPS tank. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at Zarya right now and I'm thinking, like, man, she's looking a little bit scary. The last thing I'd like to mention is, you might be thinking the 25 health increase to the bubble doesn't really matter. I mean, some people sometimes break the bubbles, but oftentimes people don't bother. In fact, a lot of people don't even know you can break bubble. If you didn't know, yeah, you can. They only have 200 HP. Feels like a lot more, but no, they only have 200 HP. Well, 225 now. Well, guess what? When they get more health, they give more charge. The charge they give is based off their health. So now they have 225 health, they don't grant 40 charge anymore. They grant 45. So Zarya gets more charge, which means she does even more damage. As if she already wasn't getting enough damage by the fact she ignores armor and everyone else is dying to armor right now. So Zarya's looking pretty spooky. I think they might even know they're overtuning Zarya a little bit here, and they might be doing it because they know they can't handle another Orisa meta, you know? So, and I will say, like, that's technically not good, but I have to admit, it does bring a smile to my face if that's the reasoning, that they're just like, yeah, no, we're not letting another fucking Orisa meta ruin this game. We're just going to make sure, even if we do buff Orisa this patch, that we buff Zarya more. That is kind of funny. Okay, but this is where it becomes really, really important. I just realised I should have probably mentioned this way earlier, but I mean, I just went over my head. Damage roll passive has been changed. It is only half as effective against tanks now. Now, I have mixed feelings on this. I like it, but I don't. Okay. I am a massive defender of the DPS passive. Again, my opinion on it has always been, it has ultimately weeded out the weak players from the strong. Good tanks don't suffer that much towards the DPS passive. Bad tanks absolutely get destroyed by it. If you want more evidence of what I'm saying, if you're thinking, nah, you just don't understand, it's so hard for me as a tank, you don't get tank or whatever, then I want you to realise that the fact that when you look at the tanks that are the least affected by the DPS passive, it's dive tanks like Winston, like DVa, like Doomfist, like Wrecking Ball, which are all really, really high skill tanks, and when you look at the tanks that are the most screwed by the DPS passive, it's tanks like Mauga, Roadhog, and Orisa. Like, are we really going to sit here and be like, yeah, but those tanks take skill? No, you know those are the brain dead tanks in the game. And if those are the tanks most affected, I'm not going to lie, kind of sounds like the DPS passive is just kind of separating the good tanks from the bad tanks. So I never really liked the narrative that tank has been ruined by the DPS passive. Though I'm not going to lie, I kind of have to agree with it somewhat now, because the main reason I like the DPS passive is because it kind of fixed two issues at once. At least it was supposed to. It was supposed to fix the fact that supports felt unkillable because all their self-healing and immortality abilities, and it was supposed to also help address the fact that tanks could feel unkillable too when they got pocketed hard enough. And I'm glad that we dealt with the tank one, but then the support one we didn't really deal with. Not only because it doesn't bypass Sooo, in fact Sooo cleanses it, it doesn't bypass immortality field, it doesn't bypass life grip, it only really helps with things like regen burst and rejuvenating dash. But the thing is, even then, do you want to know what happened when they introduced like the reductions to self-heal? They then buffed regen burst and rejuvenating dash. Did tanks get any buffs to the amount of healing they receive? No. So, they added the DPS passive so that supports and tanks could be killed, but mysteriously, it seems like supports they immediately rebuffed to undo the literal only good thing they just did to help make supports easier to kill. Meanwhile, tanks still have to die faster while supports don't. You know, I thought that was kind of a low blow. So now here we are. And this is why I'm mixed on this change. Because part of me is like, yeah, fuck them supports. They deserve to get the full 20%, and at this point, you know what? Fair enough. Tanks, 10%. There you go. You got screwed. The supports got rebuffed. You didn't get rebuffed. You deserve this. But then also part of me thinks, if they were going to do this, I think they should have buffed the DPS passive. As in, I think it should be 30% at base and 15 for tanks, not 20% at base and 10% for tanks. Because DPS are still not going to do great against support self-heal. Because, well, it's only 20%. It's the exact same it was before. Meanwhile, they are going to do way less against tanks, which is going to increase the effectiveness of Roadhog, Mauga, and Orisa. Oof. That sucks. Although at the very least, it's the thing that's going to allow Rush back into the meta, because, well, Rush tanks need a lot of healing. Reinhardt, Ramattra, you know, Mauga, etc. You get the point. So, at the very least, that's helpful, I guess. Yeah, this is why I'm very mixed on everything about this patch. This change might seem really inconspicuous, but I think this is really bad. Ashe has got a change to Bob, where Bob now gains the tank roll passive. I think that also means he no longer has the DPS passive, so I think that Bob will no longer anti-heal on shot. So you might think that this is a nerf to Ashe, and it kind of is, but I also want to point out this is a really bad change. Like, really bad. Well, okay, it's small, but it stands for something terrible that's been a problem for a while. A lot of people have been pointing out how recently, slowly but surely, they've removed almost every bit of counterplay to most ultimates or really strong abilities in the game, you know? Like, Moira used to be hooked, like, it used to be easy to hook a Moira out of a coalescence if they weren't careful, but now they can just fade during coalescence. It used to be easy to kill Roadhog while he was whole hogging, but now he can just self-heal while using whole hog, you know? used to be able to stun Rotodog out of his self-heal, but ever since the rework, if he gets stunned out of it, he can just go back to healing himself the second he's out of stun, which he couldn't do before. You know, he lost his heal if he got stunned mid-heal before. Now he doesn't anymore, he just goes back to healing himself. So almost every single little thing in this game where, oh, they had this big thing, but if you were smart, you could do this to deny it, is gone. Now it's like, okay, well, you could do that to deny it, but let's be real, everyone knows you're going to do that, and then they're just going to press this button. They didn't used to be able to press that button because there was supposed to be a risk-reward, but we removed the risk-reward and just gave them the reward, you know? And why am I saying this with Bob here? What's the tank roll passive got to do with this? Well, think about it. If a Bob gets thrown, and it's actually thrown in a nasty spot, and you're actually in danger, what are the two responses you are most likely to do? You're most likely to either try and knock the Bob into an area in which it can't see the rest of your team, like knock it into a room on its own, with knockback, or you are going to try and headshot the Bob to death and kill it as fast as possible before it can kill anyone else. Do you want to know? Do you want a quick reminder what the tank passive is? 40% knockback reduction and 25% reduction to all damage taken from headshots. So it's going to take longer to kill Bob with headshots, and it's also going to be harder to knock him out of the way. So the two things you're going to do to stop a Bob just got reduced in effectiveness. Why did we do this again? You know, at first it just kind of sounds like a cool, like, oh, I guess Bob is kind of a tank. Yeah, that makes sense. When you really think about it, it's like, okay, so what have we really achieved here? We've reduced the reward that Bob provides for you using it correctly by removing the anti-heal, but we've also reduced the ability for the enemies to counterplay it. So, don't we just reduce the skill expression of the game all around? Ash gets less reward for getting a good Bob, but also the people that have to deal with the Bob get less chance to counterplay the Bob? That's not good. Yeah. Okay, this change, oh boy. I'll be very quick about this, I'll try at least. Cass, I still stick with my take from ages ago, where I said that I think that Cass should be a character that has garbage abilities on purpose, because let's be real, if you're playing Cass, you want to use the Peacekeeper. His pistol's cool, it feels good to use, that's all you want to do. So just let his pistol be really strong, but just let him have garbage abilities. Let his dodge roll just be a very small instant reload plus a teensy bit of mobility. Let his, like, magnetic grenade or flashbang or whatever it is be really, really weak and really, really niche. But let him fucking snipe with his pistol. Let him fight at long range and medium range with a pistol. Let it fire fast, let it reload fast, let it feel good. And I really don't like this change, because not only does it reduce the skill expression of Cassidy whenever they reduce his, like, fall-off range, because of course that means that now he gets less reward for landing longer, more difficult shots, but on top of that, who exactly is currently considered to be the strongest, most overpowered character in the entire game, backed up by Blizzard's own self-stated internal statistics, which show them to have a 58% unmirrored win rate, better than any other character in the entire game right now? Oh, that's right, PHARAH. And what is Cass good at usually? Shooting PHARAH out the sky. Except, how is the one way that Cass can struggle to kill a PHARAH? It's if the PHARAH plays at longer than 20 meters away where his damage fall-off kicks in. And they just reduced his effective range, meaning that he's going to be worse against PHARAH and Echo, the two most dominant DPS in the game right now. You know, I don't think they really thought that one through. Like, don't get me wrong, I do agree with nerfing Cass. He's been, like, pretty overly prevalent for reasons I've already explained, but, like, why the fall-off range? Why this? Why not flashbang? Why not his health pool? Why not the damage resistance on roll? Why fall off? You know, and I could forgive them for that if the next thing they did was they nerfed PHARAH and Echo. Then they buffed PHARAH. I'm not joking. Oh yeah, they removed the 30 damage on Concussive Blast. Oh, woe is me. But they also made Concussive Blast bigger and increased the knockback on it. I think this is the highest knockback ability in the game, and they just increased it. Oh, Whole Hog's probably better, but I mean, that's an ultimate. In terms of cooldowns, I think this is the highest knockback ability in the entire game. And they just increased it by 11%, gave it a larger AoE, and the only thing they removed is the 30 damage on it. Oh my god, man. 30 damage is nothing, by the way. A quick melee right now is 40 damage. Literally just punching someone does more damage than Concussive Blast. This is not a nerf, this is a buff. So, they just buffed the character in the game they already confessed is currently the single most overpowered character in their game. with no real counterplay, and the best counterplay we had just got nerfed. And not just nerfed, I'd get Nerf in Cassidy generally, but they specifically nerfed the part of his kit that counters PHARAH and Echo. And you might notice that Echo is conveniently absent right here. Like, are you serious, man? So, I think that PHARAH might have just gone from S tier to triple S tier. Because, like, genuinely, real question, how do you stop PHARAH right now? Because, okay, you swap casts. No, you don't. Damage fall off isn't going to work. PHARAH just beats you anyway. You die. Okay, Cass is not a good pick. Alright then. Well, maybe then you play Ashe. Except Ashe, honestly, isn't, like, she's okay, but she's not that good right now, honestly. Her Dynamite's not going to be very good against PHARAH. PHARAH can kill you in, like, 2 shots. Echo's also coming after you. Echo's pretty good against Ashe. In fact, Duplicate is a pretty good, Ashe is a really good duplicate target for Echo as well. So, like, oh, that's not good for you. Also, I feel like Ashe wouldn't go well into a lot of these, like, rush characters that'll probably just run it down mid and trample her over. There's the Bob change, which honestly might end up being a nerf, despite how annoying it is to counterplay. I'm looking at Ashe, and I'm like, I don't know if you want to play Ashe. So if you're not going to play Ashe, who are you going to play to counter them? Well, maybe you play Soldier, and I think Soldier is still good at countering them, but Soldier just got worse at everything else because of the armor changes. So while you can play Soldier to counter PHARAH or Echo, I feel like he's not going to achieve anything else other than countering PHARAH or Echo. So, okay. Wow, you're really losing all the options you have to potentially counterplay what is already the best character in the game, who just got buffed. Okay then. Which brings us down to support. Ana, oh my god, this is actually comedy. You cannot make this shit up. I was literally ranting, like a year ago, about the fact that they will keep, like, changing the cooldowns and the durations of Anti-Nade and Sleep Dart for the rest of time before they realize that, like, heal and damage power creep is the problem with the game, and that's what makes Ana either too strong or too weak, and not anything else. And, like, whenever Ana is way too hard on the spectrum either side, either way too weak or way too strong, it's almost always because healing is doing too much, and you need Anti-Nade to cut through it. Thingy. And while this more applies to Anti-Nade, I just can't help but find it hilarious that they're doing the same thing with Sleep Dart now, where it's like, okay, Sleep Dart lasts 5 seconds. Oh, actually, we've randomly decided now that it lasts 3.5 seconds on tank. And, okay, maybe that would be a cool idea if you're going to be consistent with that vision, that tank should take less, like, negative effects from debuffs that people apply to them because it's easier to bully them with debuffs. Except they never did it for anything else except Sleep Dart. And we've literally asked them about that, and they were like, yeah, well, we think that's, like, kind of confusing for players, if they have to memorize different amounts of durations for tanks and squishies. But then they completely ignore the fact they literally already did it for Sleep Dart, and they have done it for years, and they never reverted it. And now instead of reverting it to be consistent, instead they're doubling down on it, saying, no, let's make it 3 seconds. And it's like, okay, I mean, I'm not necessarily, like, super mad, because it's like, oh no, I'm never going to play Ana again. My Sleep Dart lasts half a second less time than it did before. It's more like, for the love of God, pick a lane. Do you want tanks to have reduced effects from debuffs, or do you not want that? One or the other. I personally agree with the notion that tanks should take reduced debuffs. They should take reduced effects from anti-nades, from sleep darts, from discord orbs. I agree with that notion. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just want you to be consistent. Why is sleep dart the only ability in the entire game we do this for? Like, genuine question, why? Okay. This isn't actually a change, really. All it is that allies no longer see that your healing pylon got broke. Only you see it now as Illari, because it was apparently distracting. I kind of like that you got to see it, but I completely get it. Especially if you're a new player and you don't even know what Illari does yet, because you haven't played him yet. You might be like, what the hell is that? You know, it might confuse you. And lastly, Zenyatta's Transcendence ultimate cost got decreased by 10%. Okay. So, what's the meta? What do I think? Okay, so, of course, don't take this as I am the god of Overwatch and I am correct. Like, obviously, this is me making a prediction before I've even played a single fucking game in the mid-season. The whole point of this is for me to test my predicting skills. I want to have it on record so I can look back and be like, hey, look, I was right, you fucking idiots. Or I can be like, hey, yeah, yeah, maybe I should have thought that take a bit more through. But either way, I really think, as for all the reasons I've mentioned, Rush Meta is going to be back. All the Rush characters are getting giga buffed. I just don't know. I'll put it this way. Ramattra now, if he uses Nemesis form, even if he doesn't shield or block, has an effective HP pool of 1,100 against every character in the game that's bad against armor, which, as we've already demonstrated, is at this point basically more than half the characters in the game. So Ramattra's effective HP pool is 1,100 at minimum right now. That is assuming no block, no shield. Then you factor in the 75% damage resistance with block, which stacks. You factor in that he has a 1,000 HP shield. You factor in that he gets Nemesis form every 7 seconds, and every time he gets another Nemesis form, he gets another 600 effective HP. You factor in the fact that Annihilation also enters him into Nemesis form for another on-demand 600 HP attached to his already existing ultimate. And then you look at this character and think, okay, if you've got like a Ramattra with a Lucio Kiri running it down mid, like, what stops you? Like, genuine question, what stops this, like, 3,000 effective HP Ramattra from just running it down mid with Lucio speed and Sooo? Like, what is going to stop him in the entire game? Like, genuine question, what can stop that? Because I don't think there's much. Knockbacks maybe could have stopped him, but oh wait, we gave the tank passive for knockback reduction, so you can't counterplay that way. Well, just doing enough damage, right? Just doing enough damage to a 3,000 effective HP target that can grant himself 75% damage reduction on command just by holding right-click, that has a Sooo at the ready for the second that you might actually get him low, and a speed boost from Lucio? Yeah, fucking right. You know, that's never gonna work. Okay, so basically the only way I can see Ramattra ever dying is if, like, you have, like, Roadhog add a Zen, and you, like, hook him out of block, pull him away from his supports, and then, like, sleep anti-discord him, and somehow kill him before he gets Sooo, or kill him while Sooo is down. I feel like that's, like, the only way you could ever kill Ramattra now. And it's not just Ramattra. I mean, Roadhog is going to be hard to stop, Maug is going to be hard to stop, Reinhardt's going to be hard to stop. All these characters are just going to run it right down mid, and just, I'm looking at it thinking, what's going to stop them from just running it down mid? I don't think anything's going to stop them from running it down mid. I think they're just the unstoppable force. In fact, that's a good way to put it. You know the whole, like, immovable object versus unstoppable force like meme? Season 6, like, the Orisa Illari bat meta was the unstoppable force, immovable object meta, where you just build up, like, a fucking, like, fortress, you know? And you don't move, and you're impenetrable, and no one ever dies, because no one can die, because they've got way too much healing and way too much damage reduction. And I think we were slowly leaning back towards that meta, and don't get me wrong, that meta is hell. And I was really worried that this mid-season would drag us into another Season 6. But especially because Illari was already on the menu this season. But then that didn't happen, which is good that we didn't get that, but instead we've been steered to the next worst thing, in my opinion. The immovable force meta. Which is better, because at least you're moving, but, you know, it's a bit brain dead. Or at least I think it probably will be. Where you kind of just run it down mid, and run it down mid, and run it down mid, and there's not really anything you can do to stop it. Like, you try and knock them back, doesn't do shit, you try and CC them, doesn't really do shit most of the time, maybe it does shit, but even if it does do shit, then they just Sooo them, and they live anyway. You try and, like, you know, do enough damage to them, and their effective HP is just so ludicrously high there's nothing you can do. I think that's where this is going to go. So with that said, if Rush is what's in, what tanks do we need to keep an eye on? Okay, I'm going to say right off the bat, I think Orisa is still out, not only because the buff doesn't do much and she was already performing poorly, but Zarya absolutely gatekeeps Orisa. And I think Dive is out, for the most part. Not, like, dead, but, like, it's going to be rough, you know? I think that Winston's going to fall out of popularity. I think DVa's going to maybe fall out of popularity. Wrecking Ball probably falls out of popularity. Doomfist maybe gets to stay, but definitely isn't going to be a strong pick. Ultimately, I think it's going to be way more effective to just run it down mid than to bother going through all the effort of trying to set up and stage a dive, you know? Ultimately, as well as that, I think that Sigma is also going to fall out of favour, not because Sigma's weak, but more because Sigma's supposed to be using poke, and the main thing that screws over Sigma is when he just gets run over. And I'm just like, again, imagine this basically already existing 3,000 effective HP Ramattra running at you as Sigma. If you're a fucking Sigma, what do you do about a 3,000 HP Ramattra running in your face with Lucio Speed and Kiri? With Sooo at the ready? Like, what, you rock him one time and then he gets back up and kills you? Like, you're so screwed. And that's not just Ram. Like, you're pretty screwed against, like, Roadhog as well in that context, and Zarya. Probably the only thing you might be decent against is Mauga, but even then, like, man. Like, if he could just stomp you, like, run through your shield, oof, man. If he's got enough support. Looking at this roster, those are the characters that I think that are out. There's a couple characters which I think are going to be on the fringes where they're not bad, but they aren't going to be the big bad, like the big meta ones. And I think those are Junker Queen and Reinhardt. I think that Junker Queen already is pretty strong, and these buffs make her stronger. But ultimately, she's not quite the unstoppable force that Ramattra or Reinhardt could be. And Reinhardt is an unstoppable force. I just kind of look at Ramattra and Reinhardt, and I'm like, it's like Reinhardt. The better Reinhardt, if you know what I mean. Now, in fairness, Reinhardt does have Earth Shatter, which I do think at this point is probably stronger than Annihilation. I just think there's more you can pick to stop Roadhog, whereas I don't know what you pick to stop Ramattra. Well, I say that. You can pick Roadhog, Anna, and Zen, but those are 3 characters, and that's about it, and even then, basically all of them get answered by Sooo if you get a Curie. So the big 4 right now on my radar are Ram, Mauga, Roadhog, and Zarya. So it's kind of tough. These are the 4 I have to think about right now. And this is kind of how I went through my process of elimination. Oh, I just realized I never circled back to Mauga. Oh, fuck, man. Right, okay, I'm going to try not to forget where I was, but I really have to do this. The Mauga changes. I'm going to drop an unpopular take, like a fucking nuclear take here, honestly. But I will say this, I'll ease your worries a little bit. I'm not about to make an argument that Mauga's good, actually. I'm not about to tell you, well, Mauga's actually a really healthy, high-skill character that makes the game... No, don't worry, I'm not that off the deep end. But I think this is a really sad change, and it really shows just how bad things have gotten in the big picture. Because everything about this change is kind of correct, and yet it's still wrong, if you know what I mean. They actually did this change basically about as perfectly as they could have, and it's still terrible, because of what the character Mauga fundamentally is. I will say this. I think this buff essentially nerfs Mauga for people who are bad at Mauga, or even just average at Mauga, but slightly buffs him for people who are actually skilled Mauga players, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but let me finish. And for that reason, in theory, this is exactly the kind of buff they should give Mauga, and exactly the kind of nerfs they should give Mauga. In fairness, in theory, these changes are all perfect. But Mauga's just such a fucked character from step 1, it doesn't matter. It's still going to have a negative effect on the game. I hate to say this. There's a dark truth about Mauga that I think some of us have already had in the back of our head, but none of us have wanted to say it. Because if it's true, it's really, really bad. It's really bad. And no one wants to be the guy to say it, because it doesn't even imply good things about you. But I think we're hitting the point where it's undeniable. We've always liked to believe that Mauga is a brain-dead character. And he kind of is, but I guess the best way I can put it into words without having to go through the whole spiel is I would say he's in this really weird spot where he's simultaneously brain-dead but requires surgical precision in execution to not fucking feed. Meaning he's simultaneously extremely difficult and brain-dead at the same time, if you know what I mean. The best way I can put it is, in the weirdest fucking way, he's kind of like the Widow of the tank role. You can have a Widowmaker that plays a bunch of other shooter games, has no idea what they're doing in Overwatch, doesn't even know what half the abilities does, have no idea how to position, is absolutely fucking terrible in terms of awareness and game sense, but at the end of the day, she can click heads, she can just hold the entire lobby hostage, and there's no counterplay. That's Widow for you. I see Mauga as the tank equivalent of Widow, where Mauga only needs to have one skill. Like, Widow only needs to know one thing, how to click heads. Mauga only needs to know one thing, how to press Cardiac Overdrive at the best time possible. It's got a really long downtime, and these buffs and nerfs just made it last even less time. For every 14 seconds you wait to get Cardiac Overdrive back, you then only have it for 3 seconds. Every 17 seconds, you only get 3 seconds of Cardiac Overdrive. And Cardiac Overdrive carries this character. Without Cardiac Overdrive, Mauga is really weak. So you're basically playing a character that sucks most of the time, but every 14 seconds, he gets 3 seconds of being God. You can see maybe where this is going. If you can just make sure you never waste a single Cardiac Overdrive, when I say waste, even if you like tap it and you get a few shots in, but then it's like, shit, well, actually I can't keep pushing this, and you have to just walk out, even that is like a waste, if you know what I mean, quote unquote. If you manage to go a whole game as Mauga, every single Cardiac gets value, every single Cardiac never gets shut down, you never get countered, you never have your whole Cardiac just defense matrix, you never get antied, you never get slept out of it, you never lose your Cardiac, you always always hit every single cardiac, you always get value out of every single cardiac, you never get caught without cardiac, then you essentially dominate so hard that the skill of every single other player in the lobby in every other aspect is irrelevant, just because you can press the button real good, which is brain dead. But at the same time, it doesn't kind of change the fact that most people aren't good enough at the character to hit cardiac overdrive at the right time. You know? And that's a really, really dark dilemma there. That's a really scary place for Mauga to be. Because it actually makes it worse. That means that Mauga takes skill. It doesn't make it better. Because if he was a brain-dead character that just dominated with zero skill, his win rate would either shoot through the ceiling and he'd get nerf, or his win rate would be even because he's only a noob stomper, and once you get good at the game, he's not a problem. But what's happening is worse. He's actually bad at low ranks. Because low-rank players have no fucking idea how to use Cardiac Overdrive, and if they can't use Cardiac Overdrive, this character's garbage. But people who know how to use Cardiac Overdrive get to be fucking God. And so, you have this dynamic where the opposite of what you'd expect is happening for a brain-dead character. They're doing poorly at low ranks and dominating at top ranks. And that causes a horrible effect where that makes their win rate look pretty even, you know? Especially because it's getting dragged down as well by people who don't actually play Mauga but just rage swap Mauga when they're losing. Which, let's be real, I wouldn't be surprised if there's barely anyone who actually plays Mauga intentionally, and basically 90% of Mauga's playtime is counter swapping and rage swapping because you're losing, you know? Like, let's be real, that's probably true. So, there's so much now, because Mauga is one, a more skill-based character, and two, a extremely cancerous counter character that's very brain-dead, because somehow these two things get to be simultaneously true at the same time, you get this situation where Mauga's win rate is artificially deflated. He loses more games than it appears like he should because of the fact that, one, you're only picking him when you're losing, and two, you also have to know how to play the character, but if you know how to play the character, you only really have to get good at one thing to disable everyone else's skills and take the whole lobby hostage. Like that Widowmaker, who doesn't know how to do anything but click heads, but because they can click heads, they can take the whole lobby hostage. I know this sounds really weird, but I think that's where Mauga is. And this is so... This is what's so sad, is like, technically, I really think, outside of either deleting Mauga from the game or completely reworking him, or option 3 of intentionally making him unplayably bad, like even worse than Orisa is right now, aside from those 3 options, all of which I think Blizzard unfortunately won't take, even though they probably should, aside from those 3 options, if you're going to try and unironically make Mauga a quote-unquote balanced and skill-expressive character, I think these are the best changes they can do without just reworking the entire character. That's what I mean by, like, I'm so mixed about these patch notes. These are actually really clever, really insightful changes to a piece of shit. You know? It's kind of like, okay, well, you put some nice dressing on it, but, like, it's still a piece of shit. It's so unfortunate. Okay. Either way, the changes themselves... Running into people with overrun does 5 more damage, 25 to 30, basically changes nothing. The Stomp now does 15 extra damage, which does change something because it gets doubled if you land right in the center, so that's 150 damage for landing directly on top of someone. That's actually a decent amount now. That's going to be alright. That obviously increases the skill expression of landing the Stomp. This is what I mean by I think these are actually the right changes, it's just it doesn't really address the big picture problem. And Cardiac Overdrive, now that it still has a 14-second cooldown but only lasts 3 seconds, it's only up like a sixth of the time. And that's a really small window, 3 seconds to use it. So that would nuke Mauga if it weren't for the fact they increased the lifesteal from 60% to 100%, and they increased the damage reduction from 30 to 40%. Friendly reminder, Orisa Fortify slows you down and only does 45% damage reduction. Cardiac Overdrive is Orisa Fortify at this point, with basically the same damage reduction, and lifesteal, and without the slow. And the lifesteal is now 100% lifesteal. Oh my god, man. This means that Cardiac Overdrive gets even bigger rewards when you use it correctly. Mauga's health pool just shoots through the fucking ceiling if you get a good Cardiac Overdrive off. You literally full heal from like 1 HP in like half a second. I think Mauga's DPS is almost 300 DPS. So if he gets to do 300 DPS, it takes him 2 seconds to full heal himself from 0 HP. Off of a Cardiac Overdrive if he gets to lifesteal. That is ludicrous, man. That is absolutely unbelievable. plus the 40% damage reduction. But the thing is, it's only 3 seconds of every 14 seconds. And also, if it's only 3 seconds, it's really easy to just defense matrix it now. Now that defense matrix is 3.5 seconds, DVa actually has enough defense matrix to just hold defense matrix down for the whole cardiac overdrive and turn the whole thing off. Now Sigma can just turn the whole thing off with a shield and a kinetic grasp. Now Reinhardt could honestly probably just shield the cardiac overdrive and deny its value. So, yeah, there's also a really good change here where allies only receive half the lifesteal and damage reduction. This might seem irrelevant, and it kind of is if you're like a solo queue normal player, but I will say this is a good change. I think it's dumb that Cardiac Overdrive gives the full benefit to your teammates, and you might think that didn't seem like the problem to me, but I want you to think about this. People didn't do this because people don't bother to coordinate this in, like, you know, solo queue, but imagine this world. Imagine there's someone who just really hates you and they get in a 3-stack, right, with 2 other DPS. They play Mauga, and their other DPS lock Bastion's Mei. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, yeah, those characters all suck, but they can do that anyway. But here's the thing. You could maybe kill the Bastion or maybe kill the Mei. Now imagine that because they're in a 3-stack, the Bastion Mei always hugs the Mauga, and whenever you're about to kill them, the Mauga hits Cardiac Overdrive. That means the Bastion now has the damage resistance and the lifesteal, and so does the Mei. Now, what the fuck do you do now? I think you can see the issue here. Essentially, I mean, if you use Cardiac Overdrive and you have a Bastion standing next to you as Mauga, you essentially have 2 Maugas. Bastion and Mauga have basically the exact same DPS, if I remember correctly, and the main problem is just that, obviously, Bastion doesn't have as much health as Mauga, but, I mean, he gets the damage resistance from just being in turret form, then the damage resistance from Cardiac Overdrive, so he gets 50% damage resistance, because that's the hard cap, and then he gets lifesteal. He's literally basically just another Mauga. You just get 2 Maugas to deal with now, and a Mei that also has damage resistance and lifesteal, so effective HP is closer to like 500 or 600. You can see how that could be really scary. So it's good that it only provides half the value to teammates now, even if now they increase the value on Mauga. This is what I mean. These changes are all good, technically, but the end result is still bad, you know? This is what sucks so much. So, okay, right. I know that we went on a bit of tangent there because I forgot that I didn't need to do the Mauga thing. So the 4 big scary ones to me right now are Zarya, Roadhog, Mauga, Ramattra. So this is where I kind of started with my thought process. I started with Ramattra because I'm like, okay, I already thought that Ramattra has been getting power crypt ever since Season 6. I think that Ramattra was kind of mid in Season 6, and then ever since he got his first buff to Nemesis form in Season 7, I'm like, oh, he's pretty good now. And then Season 8, he kept getting buffed, and I'm like, guys, he's already pretty good. And then in Season 9, he kept getting buffed. But the thing is, come Season 9, the changes in Season 9 went in, and they screwed Ramattra. They made it so that his punches now had to hit people 5 times to kill them, which the buff they just gave him to the damage on his punches just fixed, so it's back to 4. So that's a great change. And on top of that, they made, obviously the DPS passive, as I mentioned, screwed Ramattra, because he required loads of healing to work, and now he got less healing, which made him less able to just live infinitely by blocking, if you know what I mean. So even though he was power crept to hell and back, he was just in a meta that was giga hostile to Rush, and he's a Rush character, so like, you know what I mean? It's not exactly ideal. So essentially that's been my take, that honestly, ever since Season 8, Ramattra has actually been really overtuned and potentially a contender for one of the best tanks in the game. But I feel like in Season 8, Tank was in such an awful spot and Mauga was everywhere, and obviously Mauga kind of ran over Ramattra, so Ramattra didn't get his time in the spotlight. And then in Season 9, the Season 9 changes screwed him, and in Season 10, we still had the Season 9 changes, in Season 11, we still had the Season 9 changes. This seems like the first time that Ramatra's going to get a chance to have the spotlight he should have had when Season 9 came, if the changes never happened, if you know what I mean. And again, I like the Season 9 changes, it's just they specifically screwed Ramattra, unfortunately. So, Ramattra makes sense, and I've already been talking about how if you've got 3000 HP effectively Ramattra, running it down mid with Annihilation ready and Lucio Speed and Kirisuzu, what the fuck are you going to do about that? You get the point. But that's the thing, that's kind of the starting point. I asked the question, what the fuck are you going to do about that? And I mean that sincerely. So, then there's the response. Okay, what do you do about that? What tanks do you want to run into Ramattra? Mauga and Roadhog, right? Those are the 2 tanks you're going to want to pick if you're going against Ramattra? Maybe Orisa, but Orisa's not really good right now, so Mauga, Roadhog. Okay, the reason why you want those is because Mauga can absolutely farm Ramattra, especially in Nemesis form, and get maximum value off his Cardiac Overdrive, and Roadhog can hook him out of his block, which is one of the only ways he's ever going to die. You really got to get him out of his block to make sure he dies. So, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Roadhog's still going to be pretty good against Ramattra, but Ramattra has ludicrous amounts of armor now, and Roadhog's shotgun is going to be shit against armor now. So, keep that in mind. As well as that, Mauga, scarily enough, funnily enough, like, I know Mauga looks terrifying right now, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think Mauga is going to exist in the meta. I don't think it's going to be a Mauga meta. I think Mauga is going to be one of those things that he's a very niche pick where you have to both know how to play him well and you have to have the right team with you into the right enemy team. I think the stars need to align to get a situation where Mauga mows over as much as you probably are scared he will. But the thing is, he'll still obviously run people over in those situations. So I think he'll be a niche counter pick. In the meta. I don't think he'll actually be the prevalent meta pick. And the reason I say that is because I'm looking at these big four scary tanks and I think Zarya beats Mauga. I think Ramattra should lose to Mauga, but here's the thing. They just reduced the duration of Cardiac Overdrive to 3 seconds. Why does that matter? Because Ramatra's shield completely negates Cardiac Overdrive and cuts off your lifesteal. Okay, he could already do that. Besides, shield is a 14-second cooldown that only lasts 4 seconds. Like, what? A 14-second cooldown tiny little shield is going to stop Mauga? Well, yeah, actually. Because Cardiac Overdrive is a 14-second cooldown as well that lasts 3 seconds. Ramatra's shield lasts 1 second longer than Cardiac Overdrive and has the same cooldown. So quite literally, for every single time Mauga gets Cardiac Overdrive, Ramattra gets shield. So you just save shield. And when Mauga hits Cardiac Overdrive, you shield. Deny his entire overdrive, give him no lifesteal, and kill him. This doesn't mean that Ramattra is suddenly a Mauga counter, but I feel like if you play smart with Ramattra, if you don't waste your shield, if you keep it for the Mauga, I feel like unless you're just dumb and run in there with Nemesis form without any plan and get melted by Mauga, I feel like Ramattra will probably honestly do okay against Mauga. So Mauga won't even counter Ramattra. The only person that Mauga will destroy is Roadhog, who is relevant, but that's only one of the other 3 relevant tanks. I honestly don't even think he'll do good into Reinhardt. I don't think Reinhardt is one of the big 4, but I do think Reinhardt is second in line after Ramattra. I don't even think he'll do good against Reinhardt. Remember, he can't headshot shields, and Reinhardt's shield has 1,600 HP. All he has to do is hold shield for 3 seconds, and Mauga gets no lifesteal and no sustain. As a result, Mauga just explodes on the spot. Genuinely, I think Reinhardt, with these buffs, and with the changes to Mauga, might be a decent Mauga counter. No joke. I know that sounds like a joke, but I really mean it. I think Reinhardt will just run over Mauga a lot of the time, unless there's other things breaking his shield. But Mauga on his own, I don't think so. I think he's just going to run him over. So, Mauga's only really going to be good against Roadhog, or against the Ramattra if the Mauga is the better player. So, yeah, that's not the best when you look at this. So, the only reason I'm still putting Mauga in the big 4 is because I know how scary he can be once he gets the ball rolling. Again, he's so feast or famine. And if people figure out how to keep feasting with him, he will sit at the top. I just don't think it's going to be possible. But the other thing as well is, I think the meta is going to be so insanely shaped by PHARAH Echo being literally uncounterable and unstoppable, that the fact that Mauga is one of the best tanks in the game against flyers is actually probably going to be very, very relevant. I think that's actually going to help him out a lot. But still, I still think probably out of these 4, if I had to pick one, I think Mauga's the least likely candidate to do well. Which leaves Ramattra, Roadhog, and Zarya. Okay, so what about Roadhog? I think Roadhog's going to do really good into Ramattra, get screwed by Mauga, and do okay into Zarya. So in terms of this trifecta, I think he's okay. Here's the thing, though. Roadhog has recently received nerfs, and although he just got the Pigpen buff, it's obviously not a game-changing buff. The nerfs definitely didn't nuke him, but I'm just looking at everyone else, and it's Zarya is getting giga buffed, Ramatra's getting giga buffed, Mauga is getting shifted around, but if you can use him right, it's quote-unquote a giga buff. Roadhog's the only one who's not really shooting up, but he kind of already was in a prevalent position, and I'm kind of just looking at the situation, and I am kind of thinking, well, Roadhog's good against Ramattra, and he's going to be decent against Zarya, and I think he's honestly one of the better tanks to pick into PHARAH Echo, because while he can't hook people in the sky, PHARAH at least doesn't have infinite fuel anymore, so he does have to come down every now and then, and a lot of tanks, it doesn't matter, because if you get a window to shoot PHARAH, you'd tap her, and then she runs away. Whereas Roadhog, if you get even one little tap with that hook, she's dead on the spot. And PHARAH's a pretty big hook target as well. PHARAH's not that hard to hit. Echo a little bit harder, but PHARAH is not that hard to hit with Roadhog. So I think that Roadhog is honestly a decent contender. I think the main thing the only reason I think that Roadhog might struggle is because he doesn't have any armor, and he also doesn't deal with armor. So he kind of gets screwed by the armor changes. But Roadhog's still on the radar, I would say. I'd probably put Roadhog 3rd, which leaves the top 2. Ramattra, and I think the top is Zarya. Let me explain. Look at these matchups. Zarya does good into Mauga. Good into... depends against Roadhog. In the 1v1, Roadhog's better. As a team, Zarya's better. Like, a team with Zarya usually does better against a team with Roadhog, but a Zarya versus a Roadhog, the Roadhog wins, if you know what I mean. Very much circumstantial, but ultimately a pretty even matchup, depends on the circumstances. And Ramattra is the only one that really does well into Zarya, and even then, it's not like Zarya gets countered by Ramattra, it's more like a 55-45 kind of matchup. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the fact that Zarya's beam, while not long range enough most of the time, is still one of the longest range tank weapons in the game and one of the best options for dealing with flyers. I am kind of looking at these and looking at all the buffs Zarya's got, and I'm just thinking, you know, what keeps her in check? Like, okay, if Ramattra does look ludicrously strong right now, but they can still hook him. They can still sleep him and anti him. They can still hit him with a Discord Orb. And I'm looking at characters like Roadhog, and I'm like, yeah, well, Mauga still keeps him in check, Anna Zen keeps him in check, blah, blah, blah. Mauga, Anna Zen keeps him in check, Poke, DPS keep him in check, etc. You know, Shields keep him in check. And then there's Zarya, and it's like, okay, so Ramattra could maybe kind of keep her in check. Soldier could have kept her in check, but again, the Armour Changes screwed him. Anna Zen isn't great against Zarya. Zarya is one of the best tanks in the game against those two. I think the only thing that really exists that looks like likely to be meta is Lucio is good against Zarya, and Lucio looks like he might be pretty good. And this might be a hot take, but I think that Hanzo might be sneaking up, and Hanzo would be pretty good against Zarya. But other than that, I'm not gonna lie, most of the things that would help deal with Zarya aren't looking too good right now, at least compared to the competition. So I'm just thinking, like, I can see the meta where Ramattra takes over, but I can also see the response to that. I can see the meta where Mauga takes over, but I can also see the response to that. I can see the meta where Roadhog takes over, but I can also see the response to that. Now, I can see the meta where Zarya takes over, but what's the response to it? Like, if you do run, like, I don't know, some weird fucking, like, Hanzo, PHARAH, Lucio, Kiriko team or whatever into it, with Ramattra as your tank, what do you do about the enemy PHARAH Echo? You know? You need a hit scan. But, like, the hit scan aren't even that good against PHARAH now, especially with the headshot damage reduction. So, sorry, against Zarya, but obviously they aren't good against PHARAH as well. So, I don't know, I think everything you can pick to deal with Zarya makes you vulnerable to PHARAH Echo. And again, I think PHARAH Echo are just like everything I'm saying, I'm putting a lot of importance on tanks because obviously there's a lot happening here. But, like, to be honest, I want to just remind you, the most relevant thing here is PHARAH Echo continue to dominate and more of their counters are getting kicked out of the meta. So, like, they are going to be the most relevant things in this game. So the fact that Zarya is okay against them for a tank, also most of the things that counter her require you to make you vulnerable to playing into, like, a PHARAH Echo. And she's got good matchups against the other meta tanks. She's getting loads of buffs. I feel like Zarya meta could be on the horizon. I feel like if I had to pick one out of these four, I think it's Zarya. I think all four of these are in the running. I think all four of these, maybe five if you want to count Reinhardt. Like, I'd say a top five are like Reinhardt 5th, Mauga 4th, Roadhog 3rd, Ramattra 2nd, Zarya 1st. Okay, so DPS meta obviously is PHARAH Echo, but I'll get back to that Hanzo thing I just said. Why is Hanzo potentially on the horizon? Hanzo's already been underrated. He's a great tank buster, and he's actually one of the only characters that's well equipped to counter Cassidy. Cassidy's so well-rounded that he has almost no counters, but Hanzo's one of the only characters that can outrange him and out-damage him. So Hanzo's really good to deal with Cassidy, and I do think although Cassidy will be less prevalent because of the nerfs, I still think Cassidy's going to exist. So I think Hanzo countering Cassidy is going to be relevant. I think Hanzo countering Zarya is going to be relevant. Hanzo's also really good against Roadhog, really good against Mauga. Only one of these tanks he's not amazing against is Ramattra, and even Ramattra, Hanzo's pretty good against Ramattra. So he's got a good matchup against all the tanks that are going to matter. He's got a good matchup against one of the most relevant DPS. And really the only thing that makes me even the slightest bit, like, hesitant to say that Hanzo might be the DPS of pit to pick is just knowing that PHARAH Echo is going to melt him, you know? But, like, I feel like you might just bite the bullet on that. I mean, everyone gets destroyed by PHARAH Echo. Like, no one stops these two right now. So I feel like you might just bite the bullet on that to get the tank busting power and the ability to deal with the enemy cast so that your own PHARAH Echo can get away with murder, you know? Other than that, I don't think there's that much to say on the DPS. I don't know, there's like an outside chance Junkrat could sneak in just because he might do enough damage to deal with these like massive chunky health bars, but I feel like it couldn't happen again because PHARAH Echo is just going to be, Junkrat's going to do nothing about that, and he isn't going to do good against the Cassidy or the Hanzo either, so I feel like Junkrat's not really his time yet, although he could be on the horizon. Which brings us to support. I see 5 relevant supports. I think Bap and Illari are out. I don't think they're going to be terrible, but I think... I'll just put it this way, right? You're running Bap Illari. Usually Bap Illari is really good because the enemies keep trying to push forward, but they can't get through all your shields. There's so much distance between you. You've got high ground, you've got immortality field, you've got regen burst, you've got a pylon, you've got so much hit scan damage coming at the opponents that if they just try and run it down mid, then, like, okay, pre this patch, if a Ramattra tries to run it down mid, Illari, Bap, fire on him, everyone's getting healed by healing pylon and no one can reach it to break it. Obviously your DPS, let's say it's like, I don't know, PHARAH, are absolutely blowing this Ramattra up, and yeah, it's not looking good. And you probably got like a Sigma, who maybe the Sigma doesn't do great against Ramattra, but it doesn't matter when the Ramattra's getting bombarded by 4 other people and can't reach anyone else because the Sigma's shielding him off and rocking him whenever he tries to run past him. So you can see how this works. But now, think of Ramattra now, with the 3,000 fucking effective HP, like, you know, if you use your block and your shield and blah 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 effectively. If you have a 3,000 HP giant running it down fucking mid, and you have a Illari Bap, yeah, you can poke him, and you can see him coming, but, like, you can't stop him. You can't sleep dart him. Maybe you can rock him once with your Sigma, but the second he gets up from that rock, he's still going to have, like, more than half his health pool, and he's just going to run right through you, break your healing pylon, and then Bap won't be able to run away, because he's got his Exo Boots. Illari only has Outburst, so she probably gets chased down too. Your DPS definitely get chased down and killed, and your Sigma's just left to die. So I really feel like, you know, Ramattra at this point is so just giga buff that he'll just run it down mid, run right through you, and Bap Illari won't be that great. That doesn't mean they'll be useless. At the end of the day, they're still the best supports in the game to deal with Echo and PHARAH. So I think they will be on the map, but I don't think they'll be the meta picks. I think the meta picks will rather come down to 5 characters. And essentially, there's 2 of them are in a pair, and 3 of them are in a trio. The pair is Kiri Lucio, which I've already alluded to, and the trio is Ana, Brig, Zen. So let's start with the trio, because I think this is more relevant. I think Ana and Zen are going to be must-picks during a lot of the games in this meta. You're going to need an Ana or a Zen to make this Ramattra, this Mauga, this Roadhog ever fucking killable. Like, imagine trying to kill this 3,000 effective HP Ramattra with no CC, no damage amplification, no anti-heal. It's fucking impossible. You need the Ana Zen here to completely shut off Ramattra's ability to just continue to generate infinite amounts of health. You're gonna need it. One or the other. And of course, the downside of running Ana or Zen is that you become vulnerable to dive. Now, that's why the Brig is in the trio, because the Brig can shut that down. But there's a reason why I describe this as a trio, rather than just saying Ana Brig or Ana Zen. Sorry, Ana Brig or Brig Zen. I think Ana Zen will still be viable. I think Ana Zen might even be meta, because this shouldn't work. Ana Zen is really greedy. It can be really powerful, but you leave yourself so open to getting dived. Both of these characters are the most dive vulnerable supports in the entire video game. So running both of them gives you ludicrous value against tanks at the cost of making you ludicrously vulnerable to like a Sombra in your backline, a Tracer, a Genji, even just like a Winston or a Wrecking Ball. They will destroy you if you're running Ana Zen. But here's the thing. Who in their right fucking mind is going to want to play Genji right now? With 3,000 HP Ramattras and Reinhardts running around, and PHARAH Echo in the sky? Who's going to want to play Tracer when their biggest threats are in the sky where they can't reach them, and the tanks they're trying to shoot are taking half damage because of all the armor they have, and they can't even like whittle down their health bars at all? Who in their right mind is going to want to play the characters that actually punish you for playing Ana Zen? As a result, I wonder if you'll be able to get away with running Ana Zen, even though it leaves you wide open, because the only characters who could punish you for playing Ana Zen are just going to be so terrible in the meta that you won't want to pick them. And if you get to run both Ana and Zen, that's going to be huge. It's going to give you so much value to deal with Mauga, Roadhog, and Ramattra. So that just leaves Lucio Kiri. Obviously, I still think Ana Brig and Zen might still see some play, because obviously if Dive is still in the meta, and like, or at least on the map even, and in fairness, Echo is technically like a pseudo-dive character, and so is PHARAH, so like you might still need the Brig to protect your other support, just because of Echo PHARAH, even though they're not like full-on dive characters, they kind of can dive. I know that Brig doesn't shoot them well, but she does a good job at protecting her allies at the very least. Either way, thingy. Other than that, you might run Kiri Lucio. Why Kiri Lucio? Lucio because you need speed for Ramattra, and Mauga, and Zarya, and Reinhardt. Roadhog, I feel like people don't talk about Roadhog with Lucio, but I feel like even Roadhog with Lucio feels really good. It's just not like a traditional combo, I guess, but, you know, I think that Lucio feels really good with all the big tanks right here that I'm worried about. And the reason why you need Kiriko is because of the Ana Zen. Because there's going to be constant sleep darts, antis, and discord orbs, and those are going to be the only thing that can stop you from running the enemy team over. The only thing you can do to respond to that is Sooo. So I'm in a weird spot right now where I do think that Kiriko is kind of underwhelming and overrated, in like at least on ladder. But I think that now this meta has shifted to place so much importance on Sleep Dart, Anti, and Discord Orb, it might mean that Kiriko gets another fucking meta where like she's everywhere. Just because, I mean, again, the only thing that stops the 3000 HP Ramattra from running it down mid and trampling everyone is when the Sleep Dart, the Anti, and the Discord hits. And then you land one Sooo and all of it gets undone, and oh shit. This is another reason why I think that despite the fact that Ana Zen is not as coherent a proper composition as Ana Brig or Brig Zen, I think that Ana Zen has a chance as well, because if you're smart, it might be valuable to use Sleep Dart and Discord before the Sooo comes out, and then after the Sooo use Nade. So like you can use some of your like abilities to bait the Sooo, and then use Nade once the Soo's out. Whereas you can't do that if you're only running like, well, maybe you can a little bit, but you can't do that with just Ana Brig or just Brig Zen as much, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I think that that's why it could be Lucio Kiri. I think that Lifeweaver, I mean, it's Lifeweaver. He can, at the very least, I will admit, he is pretty good at bailing out Ramattra, Roadhog, and Mauga, but, you know, it's Lifeweaver. Especially, the thing is, I think he'd actually have a chance, because I think he is good with most of the good tanks, and I do think high healing numbers are going to be much more valuable now, and that is what he provides. But I think the main thing that's going to keep him out is that you need to do some damage with Lifeweaver to make him worthwhile, and he actually does have really good DPS, it's just really hard to use his weapon. But the thing is that armor kind of ruins that, because he has so many thorns. So the fact that armor is the way it is right now, I think is just going to kick Lifeweaver out of having his chance. Mercy's already terrible right now, we all know. I already covered Bap and Illari. Moira is going to tickle these tanks, and they're just going to run her over. I don't think Moira is going to be good at all. So yeah, that explains why those five, I think, are going to be kind of out of the picture. I think it's going to come down to Lucio Kiri, Ana Brig, Brig Zen, or Zen Ana. Those are going to be the comps that you run. In fact, maybe even a little bit of Ana Zen. I'm sorry, not Ana Zen, Ana Kiri. Because Ana Kiri is typically very good with Mauga. Could be the same with Roadhog. Again, that leaves you a little bit open to getting dope, but that kind of doesn't matter anymore. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of what I see for the meta. That's kind of what I have in mind in terms of predicting the game. One last thing I just want to show, because I want to get across what I mean with the whole Mauga cardiac overdrive thing. I want you to understand what this looks like. When I say that Mauga is like even more feast or famine than before, I really mean it. So you're going to have to excuse me, it's a little bit difficult to reduce his health because he gets over health for landing headshots, but I need to kill people to... So... Okay, that'll do. Now... I'm already at full health. Now, in fairness, I will also want to demonstrate... I didn't do that perfectly because the tank passive kick... the health regeneration passive kicked in. But, I do also want to demonstrate the difference armor makes. So, you see how much slower that health goes up? Like, don't get me wrong, it still goes up pretty fast, but like, you know, that's the difference armor's making. Either way, yeah. When you see especially how short this lasts, like, there's my window gone. Now, I know you might be thinking, okay, but like, you're so ludicrously powerful, that doesn't matter. But again, remember, if that Reinhardt just holds shield that whole time, do you think I break a 1600 HP Reinhardt shield that I can't headshot in 3 seconds? No. No, I don't. I absolutely don't. So that's what I mean with Mauga right now, is like, I think he's going to be in this weird spot where they have genuinely made him more skill expressive, which is technically a good thing, but like, man, he's going to cause so much more pain when you actually play him correctly, you know? And that's just how the character is. That's just the very questionable design of this character, I guess. Anyway. Oh, actually, I was going to say I think I made my point, but there's one last thing I want to check. I said that I'm pretty sure Sigma can no longer... Sorry, is closer to the one-shot now, but can't do it yet. Let me check that. So, I actually do not know. How much do these things do? Boom, boom. Yeah, it looks like it is 55. I thought it was. So, 120. Oh. I'm not gonna lie, I did not know that knocked them back far enough to send them off the map. I didn't think that would happen. Okay, let's try it from this angle. 120. You didn't see any of that. I didn't actually know that Rock could knock me back as well. I don't think I've ever seen that happen. Okay, one more time. Yeah, so that's 20 health left, I think. Melee makes it a kill. So, put it all together and boom, 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 boom. You can still one-shot if you're in melee range, but that's it. Only if you're in melee range. Okay, I just needed to know that before I left it. Oh, and there's one more test I want to do. Okay, so I realized I could be giving up on Dive too quickly. The DVa Buffs are cool. Wrecking Ball is already one of the most dominant tanks in the game right now. It's just that he can get counterpicked a lot. And, Thingy. I mean, I say that Tracer, like, you'd never want to play her with PHARAH Echo everywhere and tanks being so unkillable without having, like, massive, like, break down the door kind of abilities. But then in fairness, if people are running Anna Zen, they are leaving myself wide open. Those are some juicy targets for you might think. But I don't know, like, I want to show you right here. If I'm Wrecking Ball, this is how much the armor changes are going to screw me. Watch me try and kill this Reinhardt. That was all 80 of my bullets, and I didn't even break through the armor. That's 160 bullets. That's without shield, by the way. That's like, so that took about 180 shots. Now, in fairness, I wasn't headshotting. How about if I headshot and don't miss a single one? Still took about 100 bullets, give or take. Without shield, without healing. With nothing but headshots, no misses. Ball is really going to struggle to kill, man. And again, maybe Winston can bypass armor, and maybe that helps him. But I feel like with the other buffs a lot of these rush tanks are getting, and I feel like with the fact that now the anti-heal passive is reduced on tanks, which, again, that's technically a buff for Winston, but it's a bigger buff for every other tank in the game than Winston, because Winston was already one of the best equipped tanks to deal with having less healing, or deal with, like, avoiding getting the passive on them, using bubble and using his mobility, that I just feel like he's going to fall out, you know? It's just going to be like, he's not bad, but, like, he's just not the optimal pick anymore, you know? And so, I don't know, man. I just, like, especially, like, this is just gonna be sad. This right here. I mean, come on, man. Come on. Let me see if it's a break or something. I'm gonna miss on purpose to, like, simulate, like, if this was a real game and they're trying to, like, okay, this is the best I can do, I guess. Didn't even get through the armor. Oh my god. And that's without shield. That's without self-heal. That's without inspire. Yeah, I think it's gonna be rough out there. Oh god, right. So, concluding thoughts. I think that this patch is at least going to be a bit more fun than the last one, just because it's going to be something different. But I mean, that's the thing. We're on borrowed time here. We are causing more and more problems to the game that we're going to have to address at some point, and mounting more and more ticking time bombs. Like how many characters in this game are a ticking time bomb, in my opinion? Or characters that already have kind of ruined the game or exploded and needed to kind of be thrown aside. I mean, like, Echo and PHARAH already, just flying characters in general, have been a problem for a while and need to be addressed. We've got, like, characters like Ramattra and Zarya and, like, all these other tanks that are getting giga buffed, which the second, like, if we do, like, find a way to solve the issues of the game, solve counterpicking, solve, like, you know, being able to kill supports more often, etc., blah, 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 the second all this stuff gets fixed, all these tanks are going to be way above the power level, and they're going to need to be fixed. Like, they're going to need so much work to be fixed. So we're creating multiple ticking time bombs with almost every single tank in the game. And we also have supports that are becoming ticking time bombs as well, you know, with... I mean, I already kind of think Zen is a ticking time bomb right now. Like, I just realized I kind of skipped over it a little bit quickly earlier. But you might be surprised by me seeing Brig Zen. But Brig Zen have consistently been some of the highest win rate supports in the game for the past few months. No one talks about it, though. And this is at top ranks, by the way. This is Grandmaster on PC. No one talks about it, though, because, honestly, I feel like it's just because people don't play Brig Zen anymore. People don't play Brig or Zen, because if you want to play Zen, you just play Illari or you play BAP. And BAP and Illari have had the spotlight for way longer recently. Not to mention that BAP is good with Lucio, and Lucio's been everywhere a lot as well. And Lucio is really bad with Zenyatta and really bad with Brig. Well, not that bad with Brig, but not great. So, as a result, because Lucio's been everywhere, because Kiriko's been everywhere, because these two characters make Brigitte or Zen worse when run with them. Well, I don't know, Kiriko Zen's okay, I guess, but you know what I mean. You don't tend to see them together. It means that you haven't had a chance to play Brig or Zen much in months. And now I feel like people aren't choosing to play Brig or Zen because Illari fills a similar role, and Illari's so popular. But I really think that Zen does more than Illari, especially in this meta. I feel like Zen might not have the healing pylon, but Zen has the better damage. He has Discord Orb, he has Transcendence, which yes, might be a little bit weaker with the DPS passive, but still is an extremely powerful ultimate that now generates much faster because of the buff he just got. And I really do think you're going to need Discord Orb against these huge fucking tanks after this patched. I really think just poking them with Illari won't cut it. And at the very least, I'm glad to see that this meta is likely to result in the resurgence of Ana, because, you know, it's always a bit sad when Ana falls out of the meta. I mean, Ana is the single most popular and beloved character in Overwatch, genuinely, statistically speaking. More people play Ana than any other character in the game. But with all that said, yeah, I'm glad this meta is something different, but we just keep making more problems for ourselves. We need solutions, not more problems, and not more band-aid fixes. Again, to a lot of people that solution is 6v6, but I don't really agree. I think that basically every problem they blame on 6v6 and versus 5v5 is a problem that stems from the fact that supports are unkillable, so DPS have nothing to do but bully tank, you know? I think that if you do go into 6v6, I think it probably makes the makes the game a little bit better in the short term. I think it's another band-aid fix, if you know what I mean. Well, like, it feels better immediately, because instead of a 1-to-5 ratio of people bullying the tank to tanks to deal with all the bullying, now it's a 2-to-6 or a 1-to-3 ratio, but even still, you're still going to be outnumbered and bullied on tank, even with 2 tanks, and on top of that, you're going to lose the ability to kind of be the team leader as a tank, because now there's 2 of you, you've got to coordinate between yourselves. I think that also the fact that there'll be 2 tanks means the off-tank will return, which people will think is a good thing until they realise that the off-tank, again, is a tank that basically exists to do nothing but babysit other people and make sure they don't die, which means that when you want to dive supports, they're just going to keep getting bubbled or defense matrixed when already they have enough survivability on their own. So now, instead of having to deal with just like a BAP lamp, now you're going to have to deal with, like, okay, first comes down the BAP lamp, then the regen burst, then the Sooo, then the first Zarya bubble, then the DVa defense matrix, then the second Zarya bubble, then maybe they get, like, maybe you get stunned by, like, the cast flashbang, maybe then the third Zarya bubble comes down, and maybe the second bout of DVa defense matrix, and then maybe the second Sooo, and then maybe the second immortality field, and it's like, oh my god, are you fucking serious, man? I think that's what's going to happen if we go to 6v6 right now, in the current state of the game. And I do think that we would have better results by sticking in 5v5, but fixing the supports never dying problem. Making it so that supports have to be more like Ana, Zen, Lucio, or Mercy. Arguably Brig, but Brig's a bit of a grey area in Overwatch 2. Definitely a lot better than she was in Overwatch 1. But point being, these supports need to live based on their own skill, not because they have a button. With all that said, that is my fucking spiel over. I hope you enjoyed, and hopefully you appreciate that this is a lot shorter than it would have been if I went on full detail of everything I thought about every change. It was still a lot of what I thought, but not everything. Again, if you want more details on my general take of what the solution to the game is, this whole thing, the idea of supports needing to express skill to be able to keep themselves alive rather than just having buttons to keep themselves alive, I've got a long video in the pipeline that will address all my thoughts on that. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.